Hello, friends. I have a magnificent tail on my face. I must admit, this whole month has just been kind of kicking my ass time-wise. Just when I think that I might have time to catch up on things, I'm very wrong. But I'm going to try to squeeze a video in, especially because for whatever reason this week I've ended up talking to several people about how to get started with an indie career and giving out kind of the same advice to a few different people, and that made me think I should probably just make a video with this advice. These are all my basic tips for things you need to know if you're thinking about starting a career in indie publishing, where to put your time and resources, and what to consider when you're just starting out. This assumes that you've already written at least one book and that you have some reasonable confidence that the book is good enough to be published, because that is the first place I would start, is just focusing on finishing books and improving your craft to the point where it's up to an indie publishing standard. If you're new here and you're wondering what makes me equipped to give you this advice, my name is Lydia Foxglove, and I'm a fantasy author. I have been making my living mostly as a writer since 2009. I started out in traditional publishing, and then in 2016 I moved to indie publishing, where I've been ever since. I've published over 50 books. Somehow or other, I keep making it work. I've been around the block. I really recommend that everyone focus when you're first starting out on getting your work up to a publishing standard that would meet traditional publishing, because you will find it much smoother going no matter what venue you choose if you've improved your craft to the point where you have some confidence in finishing books and knowing that those books are decent. That doesn't mean everyone's going to like them, but you're at least a little more likely to pick up some real fans if your writing is up to a certain standard. And you're also going, just by working on your craft, you're going to be more likely to be able to finish books, and if you have a book that really hits, you're going to be more likely to write a second book that's good. You're going to want those skills, trust me. So you have a book, you think the book's pretty good. Now what do you do? The first thing I would advise is to consider what kind of indie author you're going to be, because that's going to inform your strategy going forward. And I broke this down the other day into roughly 3 types. Write to market, write to a long-term brand, or do whatever the heck you want. They're fairly self-explanatory, but to break it down a little further, when you write to market, you are mainly focusing on paying attention to what trends and what is popular within kind of a niche that you like to some extent. Obviously, if you've never read a fantasy book in your life, then you're not going to want to start writing in the fantasy niche. But you might bounce around to some degree genre-wise, you like romance, but you're perfectly capable of writing a dark paranormal romance, a light and funny urban fantasy romance, a hockey romance, a cozy small town romance. If you're good at writing all those things, it's possible that you might end up wanting to bounce around. Obviously, having somewhat of a niche is still a good idea. You want your fans to follow you from book to book, so you might not want to go from dark paranormal romance to Hallmark movie style romance, because not many of those people are going to follow you. But you're not really trying to build a long-term brand as much as you're kind of trying to make a cash grab, to be honest. And this is, my first indie books were more for me, but I was at a point where I was very broke, and I had been making my living as a writer for many years already. I had neither the inclination nor particularly the skills to just go get a good job somewhere else. I wanted to keep writing, so I just started really watching what was going on in the indie market and writing to that market. And I sold a lot of books very quickly. But what I was not really doing so much was building up a really long-term brand. If you're more of a building a brand writer, you're focused on more of a long-term strategy. You're not going to worry too much if your first book or even your 5th book aren't making a whole lot of money. What you're really trying to get is those, like, 1,000 diehard fans or whatever the number is. You're trying to slowly but surely build that up. This is more of a strategy for people who don't really want to write like to trend and like just get as much cash as possible. You're trying to build up a long-term thing, and you want it to be something that you love, because the idea is that you're going to be doing it for a while. This is where you're making, like, if you're a to trend writer, you're probably only making like a 1 or 2 year plan, because you don't know what the trends are going to be in a year. If you are a long-term writer, you're looking for more of a perennial niche. You might adapt somewhat, like how you market it, or tweak little things about the story, or like which story in the universe you're going to write based on trends, but you're not going to get too distracted by that. You're going to build a long-term brand. So I started out writing to market, but now I am building more of a long-term brand, because now I'm writing things that are not as popular, but I feel that I could build a fan base for them if I was able to consistently deliver and bring people into my world, which is something I've been developing for 30 years. So it's more of a long-term investment, both for me and for my readers. And then there's the I just do whatever I want kind of writer. And a lot of like new writers do seem to fall into this. But the cold hard truth about doing whatever you want, like if you like to jump a lot between genre or tone, or you want to write something that's just not very marketable, it is a hard road. And chances are you're probably going to get frustrated very quickly, because it's going to be extremely hard to build up a fan base or make any money doing this. So most people that I know who do that either just publish a couple books because they wrote them and they want to get it out there, and then it's like it's done and they're kind of disappointed that they don't sell, and that's kind of the end of it. Or they have a day job, another source of income, maybe they're retired, and it's just more of a hobby. And if you happen to pick up, 20 diehard fans, then that's great. You have an audience that is motivating you to keep writing, and you're having fun, so who cares? But when I meet people who seem like they really want to make a career of this, and they're also like, but I write science fiction, and I write mysteries, and I write small town romance, like, you gotta kind of pick one, because how many readers do you know that follow an author just based on who they are as an author and read any type of genre? That's a very small group of fans, and chances are you're going to be better at some things than others as far as attracting an audience. So you might want to experiment a little, but most people don't really stay in that place, which brings me to the point that you might think that you're one type of author, but as you get into it, you might evolve over time. Like, I started thinking that I was going to build a brand, and then it was clear to me that I wasn't making enough money doing that, so I had to move into writing to market. And then after I had banked money writing to market, that gave me some wiggle room to go back to trying to build the brand. So at least for now, you have kind of decided what type of indie career you're going to pursue. Now it's time, no matter what kind you're aiming for, to research your market. And this is the step that so many new authors don't think about, or just don't really bother to do. If you want to sell books, you've got to invest some time researching the market. Even if your book is already done and you don't plan on changing it based on the market, you want to see what people are doing as far as how they're marketing the books, what kind of cover they're getting, what kind of blurb they're writing. You want to know the basics of the marketing side, and the best way to learn it is by observing other books that are like comparable titles to yours. If there are no comparable titles to yours, then it's going to be extremely hard, because most people look for books based on other books they've read. Like, I just read this and I would love something like that, but a little more X or whatever. When I started in indie publishing, I did not research the market for my first book, and it was a huge failure. I just didn't understand that that was something that I needed to do. And I kind of based it on what I knew of traditional publishing, like how they handle covers and blurbs, which is a little more all over the place. Indie marketing has a very specific language of this is how the book looks, and that tells you what you're going to expect. Like an illustrated cover versus a graphic cover versus a photo manipulated cover, that might tell you what the genre is. The colors in the cover might tell you, just the tone, the font choice. All of those things actually communicate subtly to the reader what the book is going to be like. It's very important to try to learn that language of covers before you go to buy a cover or design a cover if you are good at designing covers. And you also really want to know, like, what are your comparable titles for advertising? This is not about necessarily trying to write a book that's exactly like another book. This is how are you going to communicate to the reader that if you're a fan of this author, I also love that author and they inspired me when I wrote this book, and you're going to like my book too. How are you going to communicate that to them? So when you're first figuring out your genre, your cover design, you want to spend some time on Amazon, like browsing what books are like in the top 100 of your niche, or you want to look at a book that you love and like what are the other titles that pop up, like, you know, readers who enjoyed this also enjoyed that. You want to spend some time looking at them, reading their blurbs, and maybe even reading the books if you haven't read them, because even if you've already written one book, it's going to give you some ideas of what readers expect and what they enjoy. It might inform your next book a little bit. Again, this is not necessarily about writing a copycat book. It's just about understanding ways that you can pull out or play up the elements in your work that have the most appeal. Third thing you want to do is learn to format your book. And I'm a Mac user, and if you are a Mac user, you want to get Vellum. I've seen some new authors say things like, I need to learn Vellum. And let me tell you, Vellum is an extremely easy program to use. It is very intuitive. It took me like 30 minutes to get the basics of Vellum, and I am not a very tech-savvy person. You don't really need to set aside a lot of time to learn Vellum. Don't be intimidated by it. Don't hire someone else to use it for you. Just buy it and play with it, and I promise you, they've got a really good help section on their website. It's not that hard. If you're a PC user, I don't know what PC users are using. Someone else will know on YouTube if you search it, I'm sure, but I don't want to like recommend or speak to anything that I haven't personally used. I just know that formatting on Vellum is not very hard. Don't think that it's some big thing that you gotta set aside a week to learn. It's not hard. You could have a manuscript ready to pop up on Amazon or anywhere else within 2 hours, even if you're not great with technology at all. The fourth thing, as far as building up your marketing presence, when you get started, I recommend only focusing on 2 social media channels. A lot of people think that you must be on TikTok and that you also have to be everywhere else to a certain degree. It's not true. I have seen people build up a platform on YouTube, on Instagram, even on Twitter or whatever we're using now, through having an excellent Facebook group. You don't have to be good at all the social media platforms, but it is a good idea to be good at one of them. So I would just pick the one that you like. Just start there and focus on that one, and don't worry about the rest. You can always try that out later when you've gotten your feet under you. So I would recommend just picking your favorite social media platform and just starting to post consistently and in the most natural and honest way possible. But don't be afraid to market yourself a little bit. It's hard to strike that balance, but like a lot of people, I don't like marketing, so I tend to undermarket myself and like not even want to mention like, hey, I'm here to promote my book, and I'm never going to mention the book. Or like, I'm going to mention it, but only that I'm working on it, and I'm never going to like remember to share a link to the book. Things like that. Don't be afraid to market a little bit, but you should also be like genuine and have fun. And don't feel like you have to post every day or anything. Like, it's okay to take some breaks. Just, it's hard to balance. It's not always fun, but you do want, like, if you're having some fun, people will respond to that much better than if all of your posts just feel like you took a course on using the social media platform and you're hating every second of it. Along with using a social media platform, I would always have a mailing list, or I'll have a Substack, which kind of feels more like a hybrid of a blog and a mailing list. One benefit of having Substack instead is that you don't have to illegally put your address in every email. So you don't have to go like buy a P.O. box or anything. Whereas if you use like a true mailing list, you will need to pay for a P.O. box or like a virtual P.O. box if you don't want to reveal your address. I also find Substack just to be a lot like more user-friendly because I'm more of a blogger than like a marketing mailing listy type person. But some people are really good at like the features that mailing lists offer. Like, you know, they have a lot of like segmented lists and, you know, it can link with, you know, giving away a free book. There's like more options with like a real mailing list provider. So if you think you're going to use those kind of options, you should go with a real mailing list. But if you kind of just, you're not fancy and you just want to chat with people, then I would go with Substack. Or you could also maybe just do a Patreon, because Patreon does have a feature that will mail things to people. But I would probably still always have a Substack or a mailing list because you can't really do mailing list swaps if you have a Patreon, and I would want to keep that option. But either way, you want one like public social media platform, and then you want one that like kind of collects everybody in one place. And I would only worry about those two. Some people, however, sell books without even using social media. That is still a thing. It usually involves paying for ads, however. And this strategy works much better if your books are very on trend or very evergreen trendy, because paid ads really don't work very well unless your book is very trendy. It's kind of something people already are actively searching for and really, really want, and like a mass amount of people, because it's going to be shown to a mass amount of people, and then like X amount of people are going to click, and then an even smaller amount are actually going to buy. So if you're a bit more niche, it can be more difficult to make a profit. Which isn't to say like you couldn't have a niche like, you know, cozy sapphic romance or something that's a little more niche, because you can target your ads, but you do want your like book to look and sound really enticing within your niche. This is something you'll probably figure out as you go. But anyway, if you have a big ad budget, you might not do as much social media, spend more money on ads, but they also have a learning curve. They also take time. There's kind of like, if you don't do any kind of marketing at all, it's unlikely that you're going to really sell any books. And if you're okay with that, then, you know, that's fine. But I'm assuming that you're here because you actually want people to buy your book. And if you do, then you're going to have to do one of these things. The fifth thing that I would say to a beginning indie author is that I would start in Kindle Unlimited. I am now wide at all retailers with my books because in the long run, I prefer it that way. But when you're starting and it's all very overwhelming and you don't have an audience, Kindle Unlimited really is much easier. That's when you go exclusive to Amazon and you enroll in the Kindle Unlimited subscription program. People pay a flat fee and they can read anything that is enrolled in Kindle Unlimited. This makes it much easier to market a new book because you don't actually have to convince anyone to buy your book. You can just convince them to borrow it using a flat fee that they have already paid. So as you can imagine, it's easier for a new author to get readers in Kindle Unlimited. And it's also just very simple to manage. Going wide is more time consuming. There's just no way around that. But eventually you will get wider distribution to libraries. You will not have all your eggs in one basket. I like going wide, but I wouldn't start there. In my mind, the same goes for your hard copy, your paperback, or what have you. If you just want to make a paperback available, I would go with Amazon's paperback publishing program as well, because it's just very simple to use. If you want your book to be available to indie bookstores, any kind of in-person bookstore, and libraries, then you need to go through Ingram. But Ingram is more of a pain from what I've heard. I've actually not used Ingram because I just have heard so many stories about it that make me think, ugh, I don't want to deal with that. Hi, baby. If you really have it as a big part of your strategy to go to real bookstores, which might be the case for certain kinds of nonfiction or children's books particularly, then you might want to just go straight to Ingram. But if you're just writing like genre fiction, I would just start with Amazon's publishing because it's just simpler. But know that your local indie bookstore is not going to want to carry that book. My number 6 tip. Am I a number 6? I don't even know. Oh, hi, baby. Hi, little head. Hi, baby. Network in your genre. Make friends with people who are writing similar-ish things to you. Watch what they're doing. Watch what works for them. Exchange tips. If you're shy and you're really bad at actually networking and making friends, then just join some indie author Facebook groups or Discords or something and just lurk and pay attention to what people are doing and like listen in on their conversations because it really does help to have communication with other writers. You will learn so much by surrounding yourself with other people who are doing what you're doing and especially who are doing better than you. Like, what are they doing? It really does help to pay attention to that stuff. And it will help clue you in to like what's going on in your genre because indie changes very quickly. And if you're just like disconnected from what's going on in it, you're going to struggle because you're not keeping up with the trends or what's working and what's not. You might miss out on some really basic tips that could save you hours in the long run. Things like that. It does help to be in touch with other people in the genre, and it is a worthwhile time investment. And then my final tip is make sure that you get a good cover. And it is not always easy to know what a good cover is. I can't tell you how many indie authors I have seen on groups say something like, I invested $2,000 in professional cover art and my book isn't selling. Why is that? And then you look at the cover and it is obvious within 2 seconds why their book isn't selling because this expensive cover art does not fit the genre at all, or it just isn't even a great piece of art for cover art. Good art and good cover art are not necessarily the same thing. And a good cover can be kind of expensive, but there is really no reason to ever invest $2,000 unless you already really know what you're doing and you really love a certain artist and you're already making money and you just really want something spectacular. I have spent up to $500 on a cover, but if I was new, I probably would cap my budget around $200. There are certain genres where you can get away with designing your own cover if you sort of know what you're doing. But for most people, I would recommend hiring a professional. There are some pretty cheap options out there that aren't bad. It's better to have a cover that is on point for the genre, but not like a really gorgeous cover, than it is to have a really gorgeous cover that is not quite hitting the genre markers. So that's why you would have wanted to do the research on what books are selling, what their covers look like, as well as be networking with other authors, because otherwise you can make some very expensive mistakes about your cover. By the same token, I've seen a lot of people try to do the art themselves or design a cover in Canva themselves that just isn't very good. And sometimes you're broke or you're writing a book that you know probably isn't going to sell that well. I've done this myself where I didn't have a lot of spare money and I didn't feel like this book was probably going to be super hot, so I just designed my own cover knowing that it was a way to get it out there. In fact, The Sorcerer's Concubine is one of my best-selling books of all time, and I just made that cover in Canva with a stock photo that had like the right vibe, and it worked. It did pretty well. I eventually got an illustrated cover for it, but so the one that's up now is not the cover that did the best. But the main point is nothing says amateur writing like an amateur cover. The book itself could be the greatest work in 10 years. You could be the next fill in the blank of your genre that people will love. But if your cover looks amateur, people are going to assume that the writing is amateur. So spend some time learning what a good cover looks like. Talk to other writers, get feedback. It is a very important part of the writing process. So yeah, that's all I could think of today as far as like, these are the things that I think everybody should know before they publish their first indie book or invest any money in their author career. This is what I would tell anybody, no matter what their genre or what their plans are. These are the things I would think about first. I really hope this was helpful. If anybody else has any other tips or any other questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. If there's a lot of questions, I can't guarantee I'll get to all of them, but I do try to answer questions in comments as much as I possibly can. And if you want more from me, I have a Patreon and a Substack. They both have a free tier as well as a paid tier that gets you access to bonus videos, my Discord, and more. And I also just started offering YouTube memberships as soon as that gets approved, so that if you just want to keep it all on YouTube, you can access my bonus videos that way. Like, I just finished a video on pen names that should be popping up there really soon. And if you'd like to read any of my books, I have a link in the description with my 3 favorites that I've written that are set in the fantasy world that I've been working on for 30 years, as well as a link to my entire catalog, which includes a lot of books that I had a lot of fun writing to market, like my steamy fairy tales, etc. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're all having a wonderful holiday, and I will see you next time. Bye!